What is the secret to unlocking your full potential? What makes your idols any different than you? How do you become the person you've always wanted to be in life? This is where you get all of your questions answered. My name is Justin Shank, and I sit down with some of the most epic individuals who are changing the world with their actions in business and in life. We discuss how they did it, why they pushed themselves, and more importantly, how they were able to focus on continuous growth to achieve their dreams. Welcome to the Growth Now movement. Hey guys, before we get to the episode, I wanted to talk to you about how podcasting has changed my life. It has connected me with some of the most amazing people you could ever imagine. It has launched my brand into 130 plus countries. It has created speaking opportunities and has allowed me to create the life of my dreams. So if you ever thought about starting your own podcast or want to add podcasting to your already amazing business to help grow your brand, head over to beginpodcastingnow.com and work with me to create the perfect show for you. So go check out beginpodcastingnow.com and fill out the form for a free consultation. Now let me introduce you to our next guest. This week, I sit down with Iain Grae.
I was God sleeping for a long period of my life, where I identified with the thoughts that came through my head versus realizing that I was actually the listener to those thoughts and the one to choose which thoughts to embody. And I wasn't using what was in my heart to actually pick the choices accurately.
Iain has gone on in his young life to make millions of dollars, party with the best, and surround himself with the world's most beautiful women. But he wasn't fulfilled. His whole entire life chasing something that he felt could really fulfill him, and he just could not find happiness. And in this episode, we dive into the idea of it isn't material things that's happiness, it's internal decisions and internal voices that are telling you should be happy and you shouldn't be happy. And Iain's unlocked the secret to not only have the material things, but to also have true happiness and fulfillment. And he shares all of that in this episode. Plus, he gives a free giveaway at the end, so you want to make sure you stay tuned. So if you guys are loving what you're hearing on the Growth Now movement, I just ask that you click that subscribe button, tell your friends about it, and let's grow this movement week after week. I want to thank you guys again. Now, without further ado, I give to you Iain Grae. Welcome to the Growth Now movement, man.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on this show. I listened to a few of your podcasts, and I was actually just wowed with the way you engage with everybody. So I'm really honored to be here.
Yeah, man. Thank you for saying that. And so we met at the new media summit, right? And I just remember when you pitched your pitch, I was like, I got to talk to this guy. I have to talk to him. I don't even care if he doesn't want to be on my show. I have to have a conversation. And you and I ended up catching up last night and having a great conversation. And as I was thinking earlier today about your story and some of the things that you've been through, you know, a lot of times we talk about growth and we talk about success. The word that kept coming to mind when I was thinking about your story was fulfillment. And living a life of fulfillment, not really success, because I think sometimes the term success gets misconstrued. But where I want to start with you is, who are you today? So why don't you tell my audience a little bit, who is Iain today, and then we'll get into the whys and the hows.
Absolutely. So it's been a very long journey for me. I've got a lot of roller coasters in my life and a lot of ups and downs. Fortunately, some really high ups, and the downs were pretty short. And it's really created a new way of being for me. It's become less of doing and actually more of showing up. So I've actually created a new job title for myself, and I call it an usher. And that's one whose presence actually allows others to experience heaven on earth. And that is my whole thing, is I just love to raise the vibe of other people and turn them on, get them excited about life, and see all the positive things that exist. Because there was a time when I had some of those lows where I couldn't experience that out at all. I was living in hell.
Yeah, which, you know, I think what resonated with your story when you pitched, like you talked about at one point, you were making over $1 million a month. Like that's, first of all, that's crazy when you really think of the grand scheme of things. So, and you were super young, but you're making over $1 million a month in your lifetime, but you just didn't feel fulfilled. And I think that's why the word just kept coming back to me, right? So how does one even do that at such a young age? Let's start there about the building of your brand and the building of what you guys were doing before that got you to that point.
Yeah. So, and it was 1.4 million in EBITDA. So net, like just basically felt like it was printing money. And, and that came from starting off with my credit card just about 3 years earlier. So the one message I hope that people take away from this is, doesn't matter where you are today, where you intend to go can happen much faster, much quicker than it might feel, especially when down in the lows. So in terms of starting that business, I had been a couple different sales jobs. I had just actually returned from Sweden. I was completely broken, heartbroken, and I ended up getting a sales job and doing really, really well, just enough to actually pay back all the debt that I had. And I was like, I can't work for anybody else. The product I was selling, I actually went to one of the events and I was just like, wait a second, this isn't what they told me it was. And I was just following a script. And I was like, and that kind of happened in other sales jobs previously, where I found out that the product that I was selling was not exactly what I thought it was when I actually experienced it for myself. So I came to the conclusion, I've got to do this on my own. I've got to be able to control the product that we're actually delivering and be able to match what I'm selling and actually service the customer and be on the same side of the table as them. Because a lot of people will just sell and just push something down somebody's throat, which is something I was inadvertently guilty of. I was selling something that wasn't really what existed. And that really tore me off of my purpose, or fulfillment, I think is the word that you're using right now.
Yeah. And so fulfillment and purpose go hand in hand. And the reason I brought that up so early, cause I don't know why I just couldn't get that word out of my head, because I was like, you lived these highs and lows and you were just looking for, happiness and fulfillment. And so again, you build this company off of a credit card and you end up making $1.4 million a year. What was it about those? And then you sold the company, right?
Yeah. It was 1.4 million in one of the months, several over $1 million. Yeah. And then I sold just after my 3-year mark of actually starting, and put myself in a position to actually be retired before I was even 30 years old. So I had arrived. I'd gotten success as it's known to be. Success is, then you don't have to work anymore. That's when you're successful, is at least how I learned it when I was growing up.
Yeah. And then when we were chatting last night, you had talked about what you ended up doing after that. And you were just looking for what's the perfect life. Like I thought about like the movie Entourage as you were telling me these stories of the life that you were living. So let's get into that a little bit and like kind of where that brought you, through your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, that was a really fun period when I first sold the business. It was like time to celebrate. I've arrived. I'm here. So I actually was living back and forth between a luxury condo in New York City and a penthouse in Miami, and really just enjoying having this money. I even had like a note that was paying me $600,000 a year. I couldn't even figure out how to spend that kind of money. So I was renting giant catamarans for the weekend and throwing big parties and going out a lot. And at first it was just like perfect. It was celebration. It was great. But what actually ended up happening to me is I started losing myself, and having that kind of abundance of money, I stopped having respect for other people, which in turn got me having less and less respect for myself. I just thought money could just handle anything. So I took a huge nosedive. And then it got to a point where I realized I couldn't party anymore. I was just like falling apart, and I had no purpose in my life. So I started like going to different schools on how to draw, how to DJ, trying to learn the guitar. And none of that stuff was really fulfilling me. So here I am in Miami Beach one day, and I couldn't smoke any more pot. I couldn't escape anymore. And I realized that I had no purpose in my life. I wasn't feeling fulfilled on the inside. So I looked back to my past and what really actually gave me drive growing up and in my life. And that was actually motocross racing. So I actually grew up racing motocross, got my pro license. I traveled the whole East Coast with my family, and it was a really beautiful time in my life. So I started riding again and started feeling a little bit more of that focus. And riding is kind of like a meditation for me. So once I'm doing, I get into that flow. And I had not even known what meditation was before this.
Right.
So I actually got a Rockstar bus, a Class A RV with a giant garage in the back. And I was like, two things that I love, motocross and travel. So I'm going to just travel around the country, go to national monuments. I haven't seen much of the U.S. And I'm going to hit different motocross tracks throughout that time. And I end up creating this social network called Real Motocross, which is like a Facebook for motocross riders, which I later ended up selling.
Yeah. So it's funny because, you talk about all these things that you've done and I realized that everything that you get involved in, there's like a success pattern. These things, like there's so many people who try and start social medias and do all these things and they don't know how to generate the following, or they start a business and it fails within 90 days, like all these crazy things. And it seems like everything you're touching is just lighting up, right? So what do you think it is that would set you apart from somebody who keeps trying all these things and just nothing's connecting for them? Like, what's the secret?
Yeah. So, there's so many different stages. It depends on somebody's development, like consciously where they are. And in the beginning of it, it's really a matter of, having a very clear goal and be able to break that goal down into smaller goals so that I know that on a daily basis, I'm actually taking the actions that I need to take. So I actually have 10 principles that I follow, that allow me to continuously have success. And when I don't follow them, it's like hitting a wall constantly. So the first one of those is actually having some kind of purpose. And that's the purpose. Like, why would, say, $1 million change my life? How does it change my life? What is it? What do I actually do? What can I buy with that? What kind of experiences can I have? What kind of education can I have with that? And then once I list all those pieces out, then I think about my friends and my family and make this purpose bigger than myself. Because when the going gets tough, if it's just about me, I'm fine. So I don't really need to do more. I could just kind of trudge along.
Right.
However, when I started looking beyond me and what I could do with my friends and family, now all of a sudden I thought about, wow, like just recently I was able to bring my wife's father in to have some medical tests done that he's never been able to afford before. So to be able to give that kind of stuff back, I was actually able to retire my dad when I sold my business. I sent him a 7-figure wire and I was like, Dad, you don't have to work anymore. You can leave the railroad whenever you're ready. And doing that kind of stuff is really exciting. So then I actually bring it out past my friends and family and actually look at my community around me and then later the world. Like, how am I actually changing the world? So when I have that kind of drive, it doesn't matter what obstacles come in front of me, because they actually just end up being opportunities and challenges that I can overcome and almost like gamify life. So that's just the first principle.
Wow. Yeah, that's really the beginning, right? So one thing I noticed, a common theme of a lot of this conversation is like the payoff of money. And you and I talked about that last night, and about how like my views about it are kind of skewed for whatever reason, right? And then you have your views of it. Why is money a goal for you? Like, why is it something like this is kind of cool to talk about? Like, what is it about it?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I grew up in a household that I was constantly told, we don't have money for that. We don't have money for that. And it was tough. Cause all my friends would have new clothes. I wouldn't have new clothes. They'd have new toys. I wouldn't have the new toys. They'd have the new video games. I wouldn't have the new video games. I'd have like my hand-me-down bicycle and all that stuff. So, growing up that way, and it wasn't always true that was the reason, which I found out more recently when I started actually talking about this publicly. My dad was like, what? Why are you telling people that? We had money. I'm like, well, you told me that all the time. So, we were okay, but definitely that was the excuse. And it made me say internally, I am never going to tell my children no because of money. And I'm not going to live my life in this way, no because of money. Money is actually like this amazing tool. And when I create value, then I actually end up creating wealth for myself. And it might be wealth in happiness or my health. However, oftentimes is money. And money is such a good tool because that allows me to manifest more quickly. It allows me to purchase things. It allows me to hire individuals. It allows me to put food on the tables of other people and help their kids go through college. So it becomes this huge, huge tool that allows for more success. So that's one of the reasons why I don't have the love of money where like I'm obsessed with it. However, I love what I can do with the money.
For sure.
And the truth is money is a huge magnifier. So, when I was an asshole, I became a bigger asshole. And then I had to learn to be a good person after that. So when I sold the business, that's one of the things that ended up happening with me.
Yeah, which you saying that is like the perfect segue to where I wanted to go next of like, I think sometimes we see people as adults, and I'm guilty of this, and most people are, like we're programmed from the things that happened to us as a child. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's the truth. How easy is it, or how difficult is it for somebody to quickly reprogram their brain, and shift from, I was an asshole and I had to learn how to not be an asshole as the example, right? So how did you start to reprogram yourself? Because I think sometimes it becomes like instinctual for us to be a certain way. So how did you start to reprogram yourself?
So there's so many modalities to reprogram the mind. I think one of the first things I started doing was actually just reading books with some more positive information, like Ask and It Is Given by Esther Hicks, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I started reading books that I read as a child, like Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich or Outwitting the Devil, another great one people don't even really know about. And just anything that comes in my ears is kind of like food that I would ingest. So anything that comes through, the intention of the word actually is like a vibration that actually changes the body. So the first thing is starting to change what I'm intaking. That was like the easiest way to start getting there. However, there's some really great belief hacking modalities where actually I can now look in, I know how to self-hypnotize myself and see when the first instance was that I created whatever belief. Like I was like the most serious dude, and people would always tell me I was so serious, and I didn't even know why or realize it. And then I remembered a time during the hypnosis that my father had gotten mad at me for laughing about the dog food. He thought it was laughing about him. And once I realized that's where that belief got created, I was able to look at another perspective and realize how much trouble he was having, what he was going through at the time. A tough job, not getting along with my mother. My sister was a little bit of a disaster. And now his son is sitting there with his friend, 8-year-old son sitting there with his friend laughing at him. You know, he erupted, sent him home, sent me to my room. But now looking back at it, knowing what he was going through, I was able to have compassion. And now I see the story totally different. So when I change my stories in my past, then it actually changes how I show up in the present. And when I show up in the present in a really loving, kind, excited, opportunistic way, all of a sudden I see opportunities everywhere. So it's a matter of like really just digging deep and figuring out what those beliefs are that might have served me when I was younger. And now we live longer than ever. So whatever I believe today, I have to also remember that tomorrow it may not serve me. In a moment it might not serve me. I got to be willing to change that perspective to a new belief. So it's a little bit of a complex process with the full scope of it. However, getting started, taking the first step from wherever you are is just the choice that anyone can just make it. It's just the choice of saying, actually, I'm going to figure out what my beliefs are that are holding me back. Because this is all an illusion anyway.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting when I think about your story and you had just briefly kind of, brushed over your sister, having an addiction issue and all these other things, right? So I realized that everything you're doing, whether it's, starting this company, making millions, it was to solve an issue. Right. And then all of a sudden, okay, now I need to find happiness. The next thing is the dirt bike thing. It was to solve an issue. What happened in your life that you felt like you had to be the person to solve issues?
Ooh. That's such a good question. I think I came into this world with that belief already. I think I was the child that was supposed to keep the marriage together. And I think that happens for a lot of people where, at least back in that era, the late 70s, early 80s, to stay together, it was like, oh, we'll have another kid and that will take the focus off of our issues. And I remember early on, my parents not getting along at all. They actually didn't live together for a time when I was really young. And it seemed like all the attention was always on me to not screw things up. And I was going to be the golden boy. And my sister used to call me that. And I actually took it as like an insult, but actually it's an honor now. I realized that was another belief I had, that being the golden boy was bad. So I had to then go back and rewire that and hack that. So I think there was a big theme in my life, which was consistently, I've got to be the fixer-upper. I've got to be the fixer-upper. Whether it's, I was a mechanic for a time. I always was fixing things and always solving these problems growing up. So I think it was just really my essence even coming into the world.
Now, are you, a lot of people would look at that as like a burden, right? I have very similar thought processes of like, I feel like I always need to fix something. Sometimes because of that behavior, it ruins relationships and so on and so forth. But also times it's created who I am today, right? So, and I'm happy of that. So I don't look at that as a burden, as being a fixer. Have you ever looked at it like that it's a burden?
The thing is, when I look at it as a pattern of a way of being, then I don't look at it as a burden. However, there's definitely been times where particularly my relationships, my intimate relationships, even with my wife, not now so much. Actually, she's calling me out of my stuff and holding me to my higher self, which is amazing. But there definitely were times where, I had brought her, she was living with her parents when she moved in with me. She never had like a real job. And at first it was like, oh, this is great. I have this woman in my life. She can, help me with these businesses and get active with all this stuff. And I looked at all the opportunity. However, when the business wasn't aligned with her purpose and she gave me pushback, all of a sudden I started feeling unappreciated. And like, now you're my responsibility. I'm not your dad. I'm your husband. And I would be saying stuff like this. And the truth it really came down to is this is always a choice. Every single thing that I do is a choice. So I can choose to do it or not to do it. And when I start to fall into that victim, like something's happening to me versus something's happening for me or because of me, that's when I can fall into that, man, the world's weight's on my shoulders. So it definitely happens and it shows up. And by doing these belief hacking modalities and realizing that everything that comes into my awareness is my responsibility. Every single thing. There's a way I can show up differently to change this circumstance or condition. So there's a saying out there that life is 90% of how you respond to the 10% of things that happen to you. I think it's 100%. I believe it's 100% my responsibility to show up as my highest self. That doesn't mean that I don't screw it up. Like last night, my wife got me good. I was like, wow. So yeah, the burden thing comes up and then it's a matter of me taking the responsibility to move through it.
Yeah. By the way, that's one of my favorite quotes, is life is 10% what happens to you, 90% how you react to what happens to you. Because obviously the point of that is like, look, things are going to happen. It's all about how you react to what's happening. And that's so true because all we have control over is ourselves. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you're now working on all these things, these programs for individuals to level up and really get to the next level. But here you are fixing something again. You're giving people the tools and the path to live the life that they want, right? So let's talk a little bit more about what you're working on now.
Yeah, so I created Evolved Life. It's Life with a Y, and it's essentially a subscription-based platform. And then I have some other courses in there, like Millionaire Prowess, that I teach those 10 principles, how people can actually make millions, what's worked for me multiple times over and over again. And then I also teach the belief hacking modalities and the whole science behind it. I teach how to discover what those limiting beliefs are. I have actually 17 courses going in there, even one that's talking about how one becomes their God self and actually gets really present with the fact that I am God. I am, and everybody else is. What's true for me is true for others, so long as they believe it. And there's a lot of layers to peel back. A lot of those limiting beliefs are almost like the veils, the veils of illusion. So as one peels back the veils that they have, then they start to realize the power that they actually have within. And it starts to get kind of freaky. It's like where manifestation just happens by holding something in a heart intention. Yeah. So it's depending on the stage somebody's at. They could be at that victim stage, where it's like everything's happening to me and I'm going to blame everybody. But when I'm pointing one finger out, 3 are pointing back at me. So remembering that consistently is what actually allowed me to get out of that victim stage. And then it goes into more of a survival and then a thriving stage. And then it becomes into this mastery stage, which is where I've been practicing as of late. So I have all these practices that I use to bring me through that and then to help me continue to grow as an individual. And I share every single one of them, not just information about it, but actually introspection questions and practices that people can use, because I'm always screwing up. And that's where the mistakes I make is actually where the access to my greatness is. So it's a matter of being able to like take that on and own it.
Yeah. So there was a lot there that I want to unpackage really quick. So you had mentioned that we're all God. You're not the first person I've heard say that. It might have been the first time on the show. Let's dive a little bit deeper on that, because I think sometimes just hearing that without like context, people are like, wait, what the hell is this guy talking about? He thinks he's a God, right? So let's talk about that a little bit. So first, let's start with this. Do you believe in a higher power?
Yes.
Okay. So therefore I'm asking that question because I want people that are listening not to think that like this is some agnostic conversation of whatever, right? And look, I'm not saying you should believe in God. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, in any way, shape or form. But saying that we're all gods it sounds bizarre. So let's dive into that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
So depending on the state of consciousness one has, typically, I was God sleeping for a long period of my life. where I identified with the thoughts that came through my head versus realizing that I was actually the listener to those thoughts and the one to choose which thoughts to embody. And I wasn't using what was in my heart to actually pick the choices accurately.
Yeah, I love
so
that.
those choices come from those thoughts, those choices. People will say it's the brain, and that's fine. They can say that all they want, and it continues to get disproven over and over again. However, what ends up happening is those thoughts come from somewhere else. And it's a matter of tuning into which one resonates, which one vibes with me and who I'd like to be and more of what I'd like to experience. So it's the moment someone actually starts to realize this is where let me talk about myself because I'd rather than talk about other people. The moment I started realizing this was the moment that things really began to shift for me. All of my decisions would actually create me to move closer to my intention of what I desired. And the whole experience of my life shifted. I don't ever feel like anything's happening to me again. That was a painful experience. That's when I was God sleeping. Everything was happening to me. And then I started to embody this and realize that through intention and choice and actually resonating with what's in my heart and line my heart, my mind would actually give me access to this higher channel. So even when I'm speaking right now, I probably won't remember anything I say until I listen to it back on the podcast, just like the pitch I did at New Media Summit. This is not me, Iain, speaking. This is like a higher power that just kind of forces this information through with a certain intent and certain vibration. So that's the moment where God goes from sleeping to awaken is when, oh, wait a second, this is all happening for me. And sometimes I can get in there and it happened because of me. And that's when I take action in the world. But most power is actually sitting back and enjoying this roller coaster that we get to live in life.
Yeah. And so, and again, like I totally understand exactly what you're saying. But like, I want people to realize that who can't see you, like last night and today, depending on what you're talking about, your whole entire body language changes. So it is really in a good way, like, but it is really something that you just feel like this needs to be said. And it's not like some forced BS that you're just like, oh no, I need to say this for this. Like it's legit, like genuine, and you change, like your face changes. Like it's like, oh wow, this is kind of crazy to watch. And so for me, like that is the pure power in everything that we're doing, right? So that allows us to be 100% authentically ourselves and then again, reap the benefits of what we're putting out into the universe. And I think that that's so key. So at the end of what you said earlier, you had talked about, look, I mess up too. And I think that's something that people don't realize is that when somebody like you who's uber successful, who everything they're touching is turned into gold to this point, marriage is good, life is good, got the houses, got the, whatever, I get to travel whenever I want, but you mess up too. So what do you feel is like your biggest mess up where you were like, oh God, this is it. It like whatever I've been building is over?
There's so many. And the thing is, it's all in the nuance. So they're all equally as impactful. I think probably my biggest mess up would be actually in my current relationship with my wife. And having this belief that I wasn't appreciated would actually create my way of being, and a program would like turn on and I would stop being who I was. So what ends up happening then, when I get my lower self, it actually brings out a different version of those people that are around me. So in a specific one, I'm thinking that it's tough for me to say what the biggest mess up is because it's actually they turn into silver linings.
Sure.
So a recent one was a couple of months ago. I actually told my wife things weren't working and I wanted a divorce. And her and I didn't talk for a few days. We were in different parts of the country, and it was like a really emotional, painful time. And it forced me to really introspect in who I was being and why is this actually happening. And in previous times, I had actually gone like at her with, these are the things that you're doing. This is the person you're being, and this is how I'm experiencing it, and really kind of beating up on her. And I didn't realize that I was doing that. So it was actually pushing her down. And that's asshole thing to do. Unintentionally, still an asshole thing to do.
Right.
So what I actually ended up doing this time that made the big shift is before I even got into my experience of those things, I created some definitions around like what is trust and making sure we got on the same definition. I started the conversation off with an intention about creating a harmonious relationship. And that was the idea of this whole entire conversation. We got into this definition around trust, which broke out honesty, integrity, responsiveness, and precision. And I ended up with a different line of questioning, like, do you feel safe telling me the truth? Do you think I can handle the truth? How much do you trust me on a scale from 1 to 7? And started looking at those gaps. Because then when I asked those questions, it started to reveal to herself where she was being out of authenticity. So what happened a lot for me is that I would create stories based on something that would happen and give some like meaning to it.
Yeah.
And that's what I actually was doing last night. My wife was just offering me a different perspective on something with buying a show on Netflix, and just kept on about it. And a program switched on, and I started becoming an asshole. I started becoming a program that my father had taught me, which was like this real scarcity mentality. Actually, back to what I was saying about never saying no because of money. And I was getting really upset. I got up and like just started walking away and was like angry. And she just stood in her truth, and it actually got me to level up. So I'm not sure if that 100% answered your question.
It does. It totally does, because I think sometimes it's not necessarily like, oh, one big goof, right? Like if, business, I decided to write this person an email versus this person an email. Sometimes it's just a self-check of, look, just because I'm reacting instead of being proactive, like that's going to be a thing, right? And so sometimes I think that's a good message, especially for me, to realize that, hey, look, like just because I feel like my intention is correct, maybe my delivery is wrong. And maybe the way I go about it is wrong. And so sometimes we have to be a little bit more observant of the things that we're doing, and from the other person's standpoint, right? And just understanding like this is for all of us, not just for me type of mentality. So that, I think that's super powerful. I think it did answer the question. So I appreciate you sharing that part for sure. So let's go back into what you're working on now, right? So you're now helping other people discover this higher self, this idea that, you can have everything you want. You had mentioned the first one's purpose. Can you give us a little bit more as far as like during this journey? So the first thing is defining your purpose. Where do they go after that? Yeah.
So one thing to note with that is there's a saying that we're all born equal. However, that's not that we're all born the same. And I think there's a lot of confusion with that for people, and they'll see something somebody else is doing, and then they make themselves less than that person because they haven't accomplished that thing. So everybody's got a unique purpose. I mean, a lot of times there's people that overlap. However, everybody's got their own unique gifts and purpose. And it's a matter of actually developing those different individual pieces and really learning what that is. So would you like me to talk more about like discovering the purpose or deeper into the 10 principles? I'm not sure.
Let's go a little bit deeper into the 10 principles because, I'm into it after the first step. So I just want to see what else we can kind of generate from like, okay, the first principle is purpose. What's next?
Yeah. So the second principle is actually creating a statement of desire. And this statement of desire requires certain elements. One is precision. So a timeline and an exact amount of whatever can be quantified. So I like to start with my statement of desire is to create 1,000 millionaires with millionaire prowess by January 2023 and create $1 billion in net worth for myself. And I'll do this by giving up anything that does not serve me and using any kind of media avenue that will assist and aid me to teach individuals how to do this or better. So I always drop this or better on there because divine order is an amazing thing and some magic can happen with the or betters. So by having that clarity and knowing my date, my amount of money, how many people I'm looking to serve with this program, it actually gives me a very clear direction. Now, I'll say this every single morning when I wake up, before I go to bed, and even prayer over like dinner. Like this is something that I'll practice on the daily basis, and I'll continue to revise it as I gain more clarity and make it less complex each time. So that's the second element. And some people might say, oh, that's just setting a goal. However, the willingness to say this every day, write it out. I used to write it out every day, and that's one of the practices that I recommend because it does help manifesting faster, because writing it down goes from like a thought, which is in the spiritual realm, to the physical realm immediately. Speaking, it also creates that vibration. So it does go into the physical, but writing actually is the strongest. So by doing that, it gives me a real clear focus every day of what it is that I am doing and why I'm doing it.
I love that. That's and it's so important. I'm a big proponent of writing things down, saying them out loud. Like I talk to myself in the mirror and people think I'm like, when I tell people that, they're like, that's so weird. I'm like, it's not though. Start doing it. It feels weird for a couple days. Then you're like, it's something you feel like you have to do. It's just absolutely crazy. So what I want to know is how do people sign up to be one of the first 1,000 millionaires that you are, helping them get to that purpose? How do they get to that point?
Yeah, actually, for this show here, I'm going to give away the first week free so they can test it out. And then also they'll get the copy of my best-selling ebook, on there as well. So that they can go to free.millionaireprowess.com. So
Awesome.
It's free.millionaireprowess.com.
Yeah, and we'll definitely link that up in the show notes. And then you also talked about this evolved life as well. So let's dive into that too, because I think the reason I'm even going into these things so much is because I really believe in what you're creating, right? I really believe that the things that you're teaching will help others. Like you're the real deal, right? And I've interviewed people that I could tell that they're not the real deal. And it's just like, okay, yeah. You know what I mean? So tell me a little bit more about Evolved Life and what that is for people and how do they get involved with that?
Yeah. And just to touch on what you were saying there is, like, I don't need to do this. Like that, I already made enough money that I could just sit back and just enjoy my life. And I live in a penthouse on Miami Beach. I showed you the view yesterday, like of the ocean and the bay. I've got a ranch in Texas. I got racetracks. I have real estate investments, all that stuff. And I was feeling really unfulfilled because I actually took an oath to myself when I was struggling to actually make money and nobody was there to really help me. So I had to dive into books and audio cassettes, if anybody remembers those things, to really get direction. And one day I walked out of one of an entrepreneur organization that I was attempting to go network with people of like minds, and they kicked me out of it because I didn't have proof that I was making the money that I was making because I hadn't been in business for a full year. And I felt really defeated. So I said, when I figure this stuff out, I'm going to create a way to share it with the world. And so it really comes from the heart. So if it doesn't vibe with anybody, then don't even look at it. Like, that's totally cool. I'm just here to usher in heaven on earth. I'm experiencing it, and I found a methodology to do it. And there's several practices that I do on a daily basis. And some of them are a weekly basis, some are quarterly basis, and some of them are moment by moment basis that allow me to actually do that. So what I've done with Evolved Life is I've started to reverse engineer all of those practices, and I've offered that on like a subscription based model. So people can go and learn those practices and some of the science behind it. Because like, to me, I used to be super logical science guy and everything had to be proven.
Yeah. And
I remember being that way, and I know that a lot of people still shift in that way. And now I'm as woo as they come. Like and it's because I've now experienced it. So with the Evolved Life, it's a subscription-based service where I teach all these different modalities, which helps one to raise their consciousness from wherever they are at, or improve their health from wherever they are at, or their relationship wherever they are at. So the specific practices that I do in my life that actually yield results for me. And I've tested them by sharing them with others and coaching people through them, and they started using it. This works for me too. So I'm like, okay, let me bundle this up rather than have everybody come to me constantly and ask me how to do this. It takes a lot of my time. Let me make a real easy way to do it. And that's how Evolved Life was born. Awesome.
I love that, man. And so how do people get a hold of that program?
They can go to evolvedlife.com/growth. And they'll get 28 days of that subscription service free. And life is with a Y. So
awesome.
evolvedlife.com/growth.
Yeah. And I'll link both of those links up in the show notes so you guys can just click and grab it and do what you need to do. So that way it just makes it easy for everybody. So one thing I have the opportunity to do is have, I've had over 100 of these conversations with successful people, however you want to define success, whether that's in relationships, whether that's financial, whatever, right? So my question for you is, what's your definition of success? And what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success?
So, my definition of success is really just making sure that I've got a big smile on my face. If I don't have a smile on my face, then I am not living on purpose and I'm not living a fulfilled life. So that's like my key indicator to know that I'm experiencing success. Now I can look at like different benchmarks and saying, this is what I intend to create and whether I created it or not. Right. So, for my 40th birthday, I wanted to get 6-pack abs. So I learned a bunch about how to do that. I thought I was thin, and it turned out I still needed to drop 20 pounds to get down to like 8.7% body fat before my abs would even show. So it was a lot harder than I thought it would be, but I ended up, on my 40th birthday, I said I was going to post a picture of my wife washing clothes on my washboard abs. And I was able to do that. So that was a very clear success. Right?
That's
I've actually
hilarious.
accomplished what I intended to do. So, it was actually more fun doing it than figuring out how to take a picture in the shower, but, and have my wife doing that. It was amazing. So, it's really a matter of like, whatever my intention is, can I actually accomplish that? That's how I measure my success. And now in terms of my practices, my daily practices to make sure that I achieve that success is one is that statement of desire that I mentioned earlier. Another is actually I will sit and some people would call it meditation. For me, it feels different than when I meditate. And I actually just sit with my heart intentions and really feel deeply into my heart, like what I'm looking to accomplish and bring forth. And that allows me to get super, super present to the moment. And that's where all manifestation actually occurs, is in the now. So if I'm in the future, I'm going to be, when I'm worried about things, that means I'm in the future. And if I'm feeling guilty about something, that means I'm in the past. So getting to that now state and like how good it would feel, or how good it already feels to actually embody this way of being. So that way of being is a little different than I was taught to do. I was taught once I did something that I had something and that I could be someone. And actually the way manifestation works, in my experience now, that way does work, but that's like working hard for money, working hard for something to happen. The way I've learned it now is actually once I be something or be someone, who do I be? Then what I do is like it just happens automatically. And then I end up having all the fruits that I would like to use. So, the other practice is around, waiting. So I used to hate waiting. And we talked about this a little bit earlier in the show about being early or late to things. And, what I learned was actually in every single moment that I used to wait and get frustrated now is to return to that state of who am I being, and constantly perpetually asking myself this question: am I being my best version of myself? So long as I have moments and gaps between busyness, reminding myself to ask myself who I am being, that is a moment by moment thing. And it allows me to really show up as a different person than I would have if I was on autopilot with all the programs I had gotten. Yeah. And it starts erasing those, and they kind of just start falling away because my mind's busy reminding me of who I'm being. So that would be the third practice.
I love that. So it's funny. Somebody had asked me, what's the one trend on every single one of your episodes? This actually might be the first time I'm sharing this on my show. I've shared it on other podcasts. And I realized that when I ask that question, it's the only question I ask that there's a trend. And it's about those three practices. It's about yourself. And it sounds like that would be selfish, but it's always self-care, whether it's exercise, meditation, or whatever the case may be. It was always about themselves. And then I think a lot of times you don't think on the grander scheme of things. You're like, oh, they're selfish. But the fact is, if you're not at 100% all the time, you can't be anything for anybody else. So we had talked about Preston Smiles, and he says something along the lines of, my cup is for me, and whatever flows out of my cup is for everybody else. And so therefore, if my cup is not full, I'm not worth anything to anybody. And it's just mind blowing. And so that's the biggest trend, talking to everybody that I've seen. So, go back, like whoever's listening, go back and listen to the other episodes and realize that the three things that these successful people are doing are for themselves. So go take 10 minutes for yourself today and just go do that and see how you feel afterwards. So, I appreciate you sharing all that. I think all of those things are totally on point with exactly what you need to be and exactly where you need to go. So thank you so much.
Could I build on that just for a moment?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so when I was growing up, I remember my father telling me and my sister, the world doesn't revolve around you. He would say that all the time. And I would sit there and think that was such bullshit. It was absolute bullshit, because actually everything does revolve around my perspective for me. So that's the truth for every single person. So I'd love to give anybody listening permission to believe the world does revolve around them. And from that perspective, if that is true, and I can take responsibility for everything happening around me, as I mentioned earlier, now it's up to me to actually step up my game and upgrade myself consistently. And when I start embodying that choice, who I show up as, when someone is heart-centered, when I'm heart-centered, I'm not going to step on anybody. I'm not going to hurt anybody. I'm going to do what's best for me, but I'm going to share the overflow with every single person, as you were talking about. I actually have a demonstration that I do with that sometimes when I'm speaking.
That's awesome.
Because that is the truth. Like, whoever is listening right now, just like sit there and think about that for a moment, and maybe even say to yourself, so assuming I am God, what am I going to create? How am I going to show up? Who am I being? And how does that, me as God, impact the world? And I would doubt that anybody in that position would be out there like cutting off legs and dropping bombs. They would be like, no, actually, I'll start actually making changes and putting the intention out there to solve some freaking problem. Yeah. And that's where the value creation is.
Yeah.
So
awesome. That's totally awesome, man. I appreciate you sharing that. So I wrap up every single one of these shows with 5 rapid fire questions. But before we get there, is there anything else you want to add? And how do my listeners get a hold of you other than the 2 websites? Is there anything else?
Yeah, they can feel free to follow me on Instagram or reach out to me on Facebook. I do free discovery calls. If somebody wants to actually get to talk to me, they can go on the website and go to the contact page and reach out to me. I'm a pretty open book as long as I can fit time in. I love having these conversations. So this is all from my heart. So it's for everybody listening.
Awesome, man.
And for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll link all that stuff up in the show notes, and so that way they can get a hold of you. And guys, look, take advantage of that. Like, really take advantage. You just have a discovery call with him. And if it goes further than that, great. If not, I guarantee you your perspectives will change. So definitely get a hold of that. So now we're going to get into 5 rapid fire questions. Some are fun, some are serious, but I ask you this. Answer within 1 word or at the most 1 sentence. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. So the first one is, what's your favorite smell?
Oh my gosh. Eucalyptus.
Nice. If your wife could describe you in 1 word, what word would she choose?
Whew. Amazing.
Now I feel like I need to ask her off the record. You cannot tell her that I asked you that question. So when I interview her, well, I'll have to ask.
That'll be the question. Yes. Let's see if it matches up.
That's great. If you could have dinner with 1 person, living or dead, who would it be?
Winston Churchill.
Nice. Yeah. Interesting cat, man. Like, great. Yeah. Awesome story. At the end of your life, if you can only be remembered for 1 sentence, what would it be?
Love, love for this amazing life that I get to live.
Awesome. So obviously this podcast is called The Growth Now Movement. So I wrap up every single show with this one question. And that is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
I'm thinking that, learning that same story I shared with my wife, in terms of actually learning to use, questions to actually gauge where somebody is and get them to speak their truth, and using questions to get people to introspect. So it's something you use in this entire podcast. You're a master at it. So by doing that, actually, I create a picture in the mind of that person, and can create a lot more than telling somebody what to do.
Awesome. Iain, thank you so much, man, for coming on, sharing your story with my audience. And not only that, really just giving back, and taking the things that you've really put into practice in your life and allowing other people to learn from you and help level up in their life. So just thank you so much, man.
Thanks so much for having me on. I look forward to catching up soon.
Absolutely, man. Talk soon. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.